If you believe respect isn't about appearance but about sacrifice, especially for those who wore the uniform with pride when the world forgot their names, this story will touch your heart. She moved through those hallways like a ghost. Quiet, efficient, nearly invisible. Every morning before the first cadet rubbed sleep from their eyes, the silver-haired woman in the gray custodial uniform had already clocked in. No name tag, just a silent badge of age and dignity. The deep lines etched into her face, the slight stoop in her otherwise straight posture, and that faded cap with veteran stitched above a patch that few bothered to notice. Most didn't even look. At West Burbridge Military Training Academy, excellence was demanded and arrogance flourished as the unofficial language. Recruits came from polished suburbs and proud military families. Young men and women with clean records and cleaner boots, ready to command before they could properly salute. They strode through corridors with bravado, as if auditioning for history itself. And her? She was just a janitor. The woman who scrubbed their boot prints off marble floors and emptied trash cans filled with coffee cups, fueling their oversized egos. The female custodian who seemed out of place in this bastion of military might. Some of them mocked her. Not all, but enough. They'd nudge each other when she passed, cracking jokes just loud enough for her to hear. One called her Sergeant Mop. Another asked if she was lost on her way to the retirement home. A third wondered aloud how a woman her age could even lift a garbage bag. They thought it was harmless fun. They thought she couldn't hear, or if she did, that she didn't matter. And because she never responded, because she just kept pushing that broom with the same calm rhythm day after day, they mistook her silence for weakness or shame. But it wasn't shame. It was something else entirely, something none of them yet understood. At 68, Allison Davis had seen more of war than these cadets had seen of life. Her weathered hands had once held not mops but mission briefs. Her stooped shoulders had once carried not cleaning supplies, but the weight of command decisions. But they didn't know that. To them, she was just background noise, a woman with a broom in a building full of stars and stripes. One morning, about a week before the Academy's prestigious annual symposium, things got worse. The cafeteria buzzed with breakfast chatter when one of the more arrogant recruits, a second-year cadet named Landon, all swagger and southern charm, deliberately knocked over his tray as she walked by. Eggs, toast, and orange juice splattered across the freshly mopped floor. Oops. Landon grinned, loud enough for everyone to hear. Looks like we got a mess, ma'am. The way he emphasized ma'am made everyone snicker, a thinly veiled mockery of both her gender and age. Allison didn't react. She surveyed the mess, nodded slowly, and began to clean. Not a word, not a glance of reproach. The room grew louder after that, confidence inflated by cruelty. Other cadets joined in, crumpled napkins, spilled coffee. One even dropped a banana peel like some cartoon skit. Through it all, Allison moved carefully, deliberately, as if the chaos didn't faze her, as if she'd seen far worse. Because she had. But they didn't know that. To them, she was just a footnote, a woman with a mop in a building designed to forge America's military elite. And perhaps that's what stung the most. How easily people forget, how quickly they move on when the cameras stop rolling, when the parades end and medals are tucked away in drawers. How a person can dedicate their whole life to serving their country only to be dismissed as an afterthought by its future defenders. No one ever asked her name. No one wondered why she walked with that slight limp, or why sometimes her eyes would drift the far wall where the Academy kept its Hall of Honor, portraits of great leaders who had changed history through courage and sacrifice. Every now and then, her gaze would linger on one particular photo in that hallway, a color image showing a young female officer directing a helicopter evacuation in the middle of a sandstorm. The officer's face was partially obscured by swirling dust, but her stance radiated authority. Allison would pause there, just long enough for her breathing to steady, then move on. That week, the disrespect seemed to intensify, like the whole place was building towards something ugly. Maybe it was the approaching symposium creating tension. Maybe it was nerves. Or maybe it was just how easy it becomes for people to gang up on the quiet ones when nobody in authority is watching. One night, someone left a fake application on her custodial cart. It was a printout from a prank website. Application for senior custodial commander. Under skills, Someone had scribbled MOPFU and advanced trash deployment. Under special qualifications was written being owed. Again, no reaction. She simply folded it once, placed it in her pocket, and continued her work. But what they didn't see, what they never imagined, was that Allison Davis never needed their approval. Because a long time ago, in places none of them had ever been, she'd earned something far more sacred than their shallow applause. She'd earned something they couldn't recognize because they hadn't lived enough life to understand it. The kind of respect that comes not from medals or speeches, but from silence, from sacrifice, and from surviving when others didn't. While they slept, she worked. While they laughed, she remembered. She remembered the names of every soldier under her command who never made a home. She remembered how sand feels in your teeth when you're directing extraction under enemy fire, and how silence rings louder than gunfire when a mission ends. She remembered commands, battle maps, and lives she once led, not just under orders, but with honor. The Academy, though decorated in tradition, had forgotten its foundation. In their drive for excellence, they had left humility behind. And no one, not even instructors, thought to remind them, until the day the general walked in. But that's another part of the story. For now, all you need to know is this. They called her a janitor. They laughed. They mocked. And they never thought twice about who she might once have been. They were about to learn that real rank isn't worn on a uniform. It's earned in blood and sacrifice. And sometimes, it's the quietest person in the room who has lived the loudest life. Each night, after her shift, Allison would return to her small apartment just off campus. She would make tea, sit by the window, and open a worn leather journal. Inside were photographs, faded by time but vibrant with memory. Young faces in desert camouflage. Helicopters against dust-blown skies. And medals, so many medals, that now rested in a box beneath her bed. It was the morning of the symposium, an event circled in red on every cadet's calendar for weeks. Uniforms pressed, boots shined, medals polished to mirror finish. The Academy's grand assembly hall, usually reserved for formal ceremonies and visiting dignitaries, buzzed with nervous energy. This was no ordinary event. This year, they had been told, a decorated four-star General Marcus Denning himself, would be delivering the keynote address. A man known for leading elite missions across 3 continents and mentoring some of the most successful officers of the last 2 decades. To say people were nervous would be an understatement. The cadets filled the rows with stiff postures and wide eyes, straightening their uniforms for the 5th or 6th time. Officers flanked the sides of the room, each one with a clipboard or radio, making sure everything was perfect. Everything had to be perfect. Outside that polished room, just minutes before the event, Allison moved down the hallway with her cart. Same as always. Same slow shuffle. Same mop leaning against the side. But this morning, she was moving slower than usual. She paused at the end of the corridor, adjusting the brim of her veteran cap, then looked toward the ceremony hall where voices echoed and chairs were being arranged. Her gaze lingered longer than normal. For just a moment, something like anticipation crossed her weathered features. Back inside, the room fell silent as the double doors swung open and General Denning entered. Denning wasn't someone you could ignore, tall, composed, with the gravity of someone who had witnessed history firsthand and helped write it. Everyone stood. Salutes snapped in unison. Cameras clicked. The general nodded once, face unreadable. But instead of heading toward the podium as expected, Denning did something strange. He kept walking, right past the brass, past commanders, past rows of cadets, and straight toward the doorway where Custodian Gray stood quietly watching. Every eye followed him. Every conversation hushed into stunned silence. And then it happened. General Denning stood before the janitor, looked her square in the eyes, and saluted. A full, formal salute. No one moved. No one dared to move. And then the general spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for those closest to hear, which was enough for word to spread like wildfire through that oxygen-tight room. "Ma'am, it's an honor to finally meet you in person." Gasps rippled through the back rows. A few heads turned sharply. One cadet's mouth fell open. "Ma'am," he called her. "Ma'am." Allison blinked slowly. and for the first time anyone had ever seen, she returned the salute. Not with any dramatic flair, but with the quiet precision of someone who'd done it thousands of times before, in places where doing it wrong might cost lives. General Denning turned the room, cleared his throat, and said, "Before I begin my speech, I want to recognize someone in this building who shaped more lives than I ever could. Someone who led men and women into battle long before many of you were even born. A woman whose leadership, strategy, and sacrifice saved my life and the lives of 212 other soldiers during Operation Goliath." Murmurs erupted in the back rows. Operation Goliath? That was supposed to be top secret, still barely declassified. Denning continued, "Her name isn't carved into stone here. There are no wings or halls named after her, but there should be. You know her as the Janitor. I knew her as Commander Allison Davis." It was like the air got sucked out of the room. Some cadets looked confused. Others looked horrified. Landon, the same cadet who had dropped that tray days earlier, was frozen in place, his face pale. Davis. The janitor's last name was Davis. That name had echoed to the halls of classified briefings and military folklore for years. One of the first female officers to lead a special operations task force. An officer so deeply embedded in black ops and covert missions that most of her career had been scrubbed from official records. Some thought she was a myth. Others knew better. General Denning looked back at Allison and spoke directly to her. "Ma'am, I've waited years for this moment. You saved us. You sacrificed more than anyone ever asked you to. And now these cadets, the future of our military, they deserve and know who you really are." Allison didn't smile. She didn't puff her chest or clear her throat. She simply nodded, as if she'd been expecting this moment. Not because she wanted it, but because eventually the truth always surfaces. The cadets didn't know what to do. Half of them were still standing. Some sat down. A few were looking at each other, piecing together the times they'd mocked her, ignored her, treated her like furniture. It hit like a punch to the gut. And then, just as quietly as she had entered, Allison stepped forward. She didn't need a microphone. She didn't need a spotlight. But the general insisted. "Would you share something with them, ma'am?" Denning asked. Allison hesitated, then looked across the room at the cadets who had judged her, the instructors who hadn't stopped them, and the walls that once told a version of history without her in it. And finally, she said, "I'll speak, not for me, but for the ones who never made a home." The room that once laughed behind her back went absolutely silent, ready to listen. She stood there quietly for a moment, scanning the room. You could hear a pin drop. Cadets who once rolled their eyes at her were now hanging on her every breath. And Allison Davis, the so-called janitor, took one small step forward and began to speak. "I've seen young soldiers break under pressure. I've seen leaders fall not because they weren't strong, but because they lacked humility. I came back home not with pride in my chest, but with ghosts in my heart. I didn't return to be honored. I came here to stay close to what I loved, even if the world had forgotten me." She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She just told the truth, the kind you don't learn in books or drills. She spoke of the mission no one talked about, of the soldiers whose names were never printed in programs, and of the price of leadership when the bullets stopped flying, but the memories remain. She spoke of being a woman in a war that didn't want her there, yet needing her skills too badly to send her away. Some cadets began to wipe their eyes. Even instructors shifted uncomfortably, realizing their own silence had allowed the disrespect to grow unchecked. And then she stopped. No grand finale, no applause request, just silence. But what followed was something no one expected. The cadet who had spilled that tray, the loudest, most arrogant of them all, stood up, chest tight with shame. He looked Davis in the eye and said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't know, but that's no excuse." Davis gave him a small nod. Nothing more. And then another cadet stood. And another. Soon the entire room, every last one of them, rose to their feet. They didn't clap. They saluted, one by one, in complete silence. 200 future officers stood in honor of the woman they had once overlooked. General Denning didn't interrupt. He simply stepped aside. And in that moment, Allison Davis, quiet, humble, forgotten, wasn't just respected. She was remembered. She returned their salute with perfect form, her back straightening to reveal the posture of command that had always been there, hidden beneath her custodial uniform. For just a moment, they all saw her as she once was, not a janitor, but a leader who had once carried the weight of life and death decisions. She turned without another word, walked slowly back down the corridor, and disappeared around the corner with her old push broom, as if nothing had ever happened. Respect isn't about a title. It's not a uniform. It's not even about a war story. It's about how you carry yourself when no one's watching, and how you treat those who bear the weight of sacrifice. As she walked away, something had changed in that academy. The cadets who had once laughed now understood something essential about the uniform they aspired to wear. That rank is earned through character, not just training. If you believe no veteran, regardless of gender, should ever be forgotten, share your respect in the comments. Every comment is a salute to those who served when the cameras weren't rolling and the world wasn't watching. They deserve our respect, not just on holidays, but every single day.